Have you noticed that nothing feels new anymore? Every week, another live action remake announcement, another sequel nobody asked for, another reboot, another reimagining, another artist sampling a song your parents or even you already grew up listening to. And fashion trends keep looping, beauty standards keep resetting, and even the internet aesthetics are coming back every 5 years instead of 20 years now. And sometimes it simply feels like we're trapped in a cultural time loop. And people keep joking that 2026 is the new 2016. But maybe it's not really a joke. And maybe we're witnessing something much bigger, a culture that's become obsessed with looking backwards because it no longer knows how to look forward. And this is what I call a nostalgia bait, or rather, nostalgia baiting. And it's important because somewhere along the way, companies realized they didn't have to create new memories. They could just sell us our old ones and repackage it, and we would eat it up. So, welcome and welcome back to my channel, where we talk about any and everything. And today, we are going to be talking about nostalgia baiting. So, let's talk about it. Now, what is nostalgia? Now, nostalgia isn't just remembering the past. Psychologists actually describe it as a sentimental longing for a previous time, usually one associated with safety, childhood, comfort, identity, or happiness. And your brain literally remembers emotional experiences differently. When you think about childhood cartoons, you usually don't remember homework or family stress or getting bullied. You remember Saturday morning cartoons. You remember ice cream trucks. You remember after school TV. You remember playing outside. And that's the soundtrack of your childhood. Your brain edits the bad parts, it preserves the feeling. That nostalgia is one of the strongest emotional shortcuts humans have. And companies actually know this. Now that we've gotten the nostalgia part out of the question, what is baiting? Clickbait, rage bait, engagement bait, they're all based on one idea: trigger an emotional reaction so people engage. And nostalgia bait works exactly the same way too. So instead of making you angry, it actually makes you emotional. I'm talking about nostalgia baiting. Instead of saying, you won't believe this, it says, remember your childhood? The product doesn't even have to be that good. It just has to remind you of something you already loved. And that's enough to get your attention, especially when it comes to nostalgia baiting. So now that we've brushed up on what nostalgia and baiting are, we have to discuss nostalgia baiting to a deeper level. Now, nostalgia baiting is when media deliberately weaponizes nostalgia to guarantee attention, engagement, and profit instead of relying on original creativity. And it's not simply referencing the past, every generation references the past. The difference is intention. A respectful homage says, what made people love this? Nostalgia baiting asks, how can we monetize their emotional attachment to this thing? And that is the difference. When we think about it sincerely, we have to look at what really makes 2026 feel like 2016. I mean, look around you. Disney keeps producing live action versions of animated classics. Moana recently was released and it received a live action adaptation barely a decade after the animated film and a few years before or after. The part 2 of that said animated film was already out. So we are getting another Devil Wears Prada movie even, and so many remakes. We literally had Legally Blonde become Elle, a prequel exploring the character's earlier life. We had the Greek mythology, the Odyssey, joining decades of film, television series, novels, and another reinterpretation. We even had King Kylie with the blue hair, the fashion, the makeup aesthetic, suddenly trending again. Y2K also happened. Tumblr aesthetics was also making a return or resurgence. We also see a very alarming rate of people trying to be going back or attempting to go back to the 2000s skinny. And 2016 makeup is also returning. Everything just keeps coming back. And the strange thing is the cycles are getting shorter. Fashion historians used to talk about roughly 20 years trend cycles. Now, trends disappear and return within 5 to 10 years because social media accelerates everything. The algorithm doesn't care about history, it cares about engagement. If bringing back something similar gets clicks, then that's what it serves. And if you thought this was limited to just movies, you are so wrong. Music also feels stuck too. Look at today's charts. Listen to today's charts. Old songs from legends such as Michael Jackson are making a resurgence, being turned into new trends and TikTok challenges. We also need to look at how many songs actually sample older hits, how many songs interpolate melodies that already existed, and how many borrow entire choruses from older songs. Take Sexy Red's Just Eat It, which rips off Michael Jackson's Beat It. Now, sampling itself isn't new. Hip hop has built incredible art through sampling for decades now. But the difference today is the volume and the intent. Sometimes samples become creative transformations, other times they function like instant recognition. The audience already knows the melody, the emotional connection already exists. The artist just borrows that familiarity before they've even earned it. And performance styles are repeating themselves too. You constantly hear comparisons between new rappers and artists who pioneered specific flows or personas. Take Trims, for example. She has been compared by listeners to Nicki Minaj because of similarities in her cadence, her vocal inflection, and her performance energy. Fill up, baby, fill on me. Pull up if you feel lonely. Coconut water, coconut water. And yes, you can say that influence has always existed, but social media rewards familiarity. And if audiences already love something, why risk sounding different when you could just copy someone else's blueprint and market it as yours? And we also have to consider the Hollywood part of all this because Hollywood itself doesn't want your imagination. Hollywood has become increasingly risk averse. Original movies are expensive and unpredictable, so existing intellectual property already has an audience. And because of that, it becomes easier to convince investors to finance something people already recognize. That doesn't automatically make sequels or remakes bad. No. Some are genuinely fantastic. The issue is when familiarity becomes a substitute for creativity, and many audiences feel that some live action remakes flatten what made the originals memorable. And animation allowed exaggerated expressions, vibrant color palettes, stylized movement, and imaginative worlds that don't always translate naturally into live action. And sometimes the music changes, sometimes the humor changes, sometimes entire character motivations change. So instead of asking how do we preserve the soul of most of these remakes, most of the time, the companies don't do that. Studios sometimes ask how do we modernize this? How do we make this something that will get people engaged while still tapping into that nostalgia and what originally made them like it? And they usually miss the mark. And somewhere in all that process, the magic gets lost. So I already talked about the movie and the music part of this nostalgia baiting. Now let's talk about the beauty trends that are also being recycled. And it's not just entertainment alone. Bodies have now become trends. In a sense, you can say bodies have always been trends, but we see it a whole lot more to an unhealthy amount now. For example, the late 2010s celebrated body positivity, and at least in mainstream conversation, a broader acceptance of different body types. Now, fast forward to 2026, and all thin bodies are fashionable again. Ozempic chic, the heroin chic aesthetic, and the 1990s Coke skinny looks are returning and in a whole new package. And they're still the same unhealthy ideals, of course, but different decades, same pressure, but social media has accelerated beauty trend cycles until bodies themselves have now become aesthetic accessories instead of being just bodies. And that is actually deeply concerning because, unlike fashion, people can't simply change their bodies every season. We see this when we look at Kim Kardashian. When the body positivity was really reigning, you could see her with all her BBLs and everything. And now that it's co skinny, everyone is trying to really look as emaciated as possible. And it's very, very terrifying. Now that we've discussed nostalgia baiting in all possible segments that it occurs, we have to look at the Gen Z side of it all and why Gen Z keeps falling for it. People often ask if Gen Z knows companies manipulate nostalgia, why does it keep working? Well, it's simple because Gen Z inherited constant uncertainty, emotional instability, economic instability, pandemics, climate anxiety, political polarization, burnout, housing crisis, AI changing work. So, a cost of living crisis, so many things that have gone so wrong in the past 10 to 20 years. And that is why you find that nostalgia offers certainty, that the world doesn't really give. It reminds people of a time when life felt simpler. Even if it wasn't actually simpler, we just felt it was simpler back then. So for older Gen Zs, that's from 2016 till now, and for even younger Gen Zs, it's early Minecraft, Disney Channel, old YouTube, Club Penguin, the Wii, Flash games, the early internet. These were all aspects of nostalgia, and nostalgia actually becomes emotional comfort food for most of the older Gen Zs like myself. And when people are emotionally exhausted, comfort usually beats novelty. Companies understand this. They're constantly studying the market, so they get it. Algorithms understand this. They're constantly looking for engagement, so they push it forward. And advertisers understand this. They want something that is safe that people will always come back to no matter how much of it they get. And maybe we don't fully understand this because we keep buying into the ideals of it. Now, having discussed all of it, I'm not saying nostalgia is bad. No, no, not at all. I don't mean it that way. To be honest, some of the greatest art that was ever made references to older stories. Shakespeare even borrowed. Disney borrowed fairy tales. Greek myths have been retold for thousands of years from different sources, and sampling created entire genres. So the problem isn't nostalgia itself, the problem is creative stagnation. And nostalgia should inspire something new, not replace originality altogether. There is a difference between honoring a classic and endlessly copying it until the colors fade. And this is why I believe we need to break the cycle. Because when we're able to break the cycle, we are able to expand ourselves and grow. We need to support original films. We need to watch independent creators. We need to read new books. We need to listen to smaller musicians. We need to reward innovation with our attention. So, because every time audiences complain that Hollywood never creates anything original, while also only buying tickets for remakes, we're sending a mixed messaging. Studios receive the opposite message. Algorithms follow behavior. Money follows audiences, and creativity follows incentives. So, if people reward originality, companies eventually will start to as well. In the end, maybe 2026 is really becoming the new 2016, not because history repeats itself, but because we are repeating it again and again and again. Yes, the past is beautiful. It's comforting, it's familiar, but culture can't survive by endlessly replaying its greatest hits. At some point, someone has to write a new song. Because one day, someone else's nostalgia has to begin. And maybe, just maybe, that starts with creating something we've never seen before. So, what do you think? Is nostalgia keeping culture alive or keeping it stuck? Let me know in the comments. So, that is it for this video, and these are just my thoughts. Thank you so much for watching this video. Please like and subscribe. Tell me what you think in the comments, and I will see you in the next video. But till then, bye for now.